We're live.
We are alive.
We're alive.
We're alive. We're breathing. We're caffeinated and about to be nicotined up here. And I'm ready. The juices will be flowing so hard.
I feel like a bitch. This is decaf.
I mean, that's actually the logical thing to do.
I mean, it is 7:45 at night.
Yeah, I'm at the point. I don't know how you are with caffeine, but like I feel like it's just habitual now.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't tell you the last time. Actually, yes, I can, because I took 1,000 milligrams of caffeine one time, and that was one of those moments where I was like, "Whoa." I actually feel the caffeine. But other than that, like I've never, had caffeine where I was like, let's go, unless it was when I was really young and first crushing some Monster energy drinks.
Wait, you had 1,000 milligrams in one go?
Yeah, and I made about $350 because I went on a live stream on YouTube.
Okay.
And it literally, it's funny. We were talking about Juji. It was me, Juji, Martine Lises, Antoine Vayet, and I think that was it. But I was like, I've never done a YouTube live before. So we went live, and dude, basically it was just like uh, a show where somebody would just be like, Joey, do 300 jumping jacks. So I just started doing 300 jumping jacks, and then I was like drinking a rain. And then they were like, we'll give you $25 if you drink another rain.
Oh
So
my God.
I was like, here we go. So I just kept chugging rains, dude. And this is a spoiler, and I don't think I've ever said this publicly recorded, but it got to a point where it was so bad that I would chug a rain, put it down, and off camera, I'd throw it to Antoine or Juji, and they'd fill it with water because they were just like, dude, like, you need to stop. Like, we're concerned for your heart rate. And I was just like, I just felt like such a fraud, but at the same time, I was having so much fun. But then I definitely could see like my redness in the face, my
Yeah.
blood pressure
Oh
just
yeah.
getting astronomically high. But it was really fun live stream. And like I said, we profited off of it, which was crazy. And then I realized the temptation of there's a price for anything.
Apparently the price is $35 or $350.
Yeah, to get me to do at least a gram of caffeine. But
I wanted to make these shirts one time that just were like black and just on the front it just said I've done a gram of most things.
yeah, dude. I mean, there's a market for it, and it's usually within the lifting
The
market.
lifting community. Yep.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
You definitely would sell to the niche.
Yeah. But it's definitely not something I would want attached to my brand.
Yeah, like we were talking about kids too, and then it's just like, Dad, what does that shirt mean? You're just
Yeah.
like, ah,
Don't worry about it, son.
I'll tell you when you're older and more jacked. When you're starting to bald, that means that you're finding the path.
Hey, listen, you and I both have great sets of hair, brother. We're
Brother, you
good.
say that, but I'm thinning. I'm thinning more by the day. If I showed you a picture what I look like, I don't know, like 6 or 7 years ago, it's not the same. But I'm holding on to what I got. I just don't know, like, if I'm gonna get to the point where I would just shave my head bald, or I would try to rock it as long as I could and just savor every strand. But then I'd probably look kind of gross. So
Yeah.
that's when I'd really figure out if I'm letting go of the ego.
Liv told me that she hates bald guys. So I'm like, so about a month and a half ago, maybe, yeah, a couple weeks before we met in DC, I picked up some finasteride minoxidil spray. So I've been doing topical. It's actually helping.
I was gonna say, is it actually helping?
Yeah, for sure. For
Okay.
sure.
I was shopping around the other day, and it was like in my shopping cart.
Just don't do the oral. Don't do the oral version.
Yeah, I was gonna get the spray
Yeah, that's what
because
I have.
at one point I had the minoxidil spray, and it was like it's so tough because at that point it was hard to know. Like it wasn't so
Mhm.
bad, and it's like when you have a lot of hair and you're just a hairy guy, like there's always hair in the tub. So it's like I don't know which hairs of those are coming back or they left me for forever. You know what I mean?
Are you a hairy guy, like in general?
I wasn't until you know like like the best is like looking at my like early 20s like body composition pictures
Yeah.
and like how my facial hair grew in and my body hair.
Yep.
And I always joke with Jordan, I was like, babe, if I didn't choose the path that I chose, like I would have like maybe a little bit of chest hair, and my beard wouldn't be anywhere near as glorious as it could be now. But with that comes, dude. You know what? I'm sorry to go on a weird tangent here, but it's so bizarre how it promotes hair growth in certain places and then just takes it away in others.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like why? Like you created such an amazing mechanism and being, and everything has like, just a response and a way that there's so much synchronicity. But then that one to me always just tripped me up. I don't get it.
I mean, from a mechanistic standpoint, it's because DHT is like high levels of DHT promote hair loss on the head. Because I think from an evolutionary standpoint, hair on the head doesn't matter as much as hair on the body because hair on the body reduces friction.
Right. So I guess there's like even like vital organs and everything. It's like, oh,
Yeah,
let's protect in here, but we're going to give you an insane amount of skin cancer on the top of your head from the sun just blast. I don't
I
know.
don't know. I don't know.
Anyway, I digress.
So you wanted to chat about morning routine because we were talking about like mindset. The last podcast we did, we talked a lot about mindset. We talked a lot about, different ways to approach life and motivation. And one of the things that's always been very core for me is the way that I start the day. Are you a big morning routine guy?
I've gone through different phases of it, and I think that's where it's interesting to talk about it.
Mhm.
Like my morning routine now, being a husband, father, definitely busier, is different than it was 10 years ago and maybe a few years before that. But I think what will be cool to discuss is, the morning routine that you
Mhm.
do, I do, et cetera. But just some of the commonalities that we find, because what I find is interesting, and when I'm doing collabs or I'm working with other people or people in the space, it's like you find that these high achievers or highly driven, motivated people, they do have some sort of morning routine. Yes, it looks different, but it's like, what are those commonalities and similarities, and what can I take that could apply for me? So it's like
Mhm.
somebody's listening to this. Obviously, everybody's in different situations, but I think morning routine and routine in general is very important, especially if you're on the go all the time or you have these big aspirations.
Yep.
And I really have yet to meet somebody who really doesn't do much or anything, right? Like even the highest achievers, maybe they find a way to scale differently, but that just changes their role in what they do. And
Mhm.
I still think that there's a ton of work and we're always battling time. You know what I
Yep.
mean? So, yeah, so we can kind of riff off that. And I think some of the things from the morning routine can really help with awareness,
Yeah.
you
Oh
know?
yeah, for
So
sure.
let's get into it, bro.
Yeah, I mean, so you mentioned like changing the routine over time, and I'm big in like seasons of life. Um, my morning routine before 10 years ago, I didn't have one really because I'd have to be in the weight room at 5:10 in the morning. And my morning routine was wake up, make a coffee, get out the door with my food as fast as I could. And I would eat my first meal somewhere in the morning between my morning groups. And then there was no rhyme or reason. It was just like, hey, hit the floor. Like, as soon as the feet hit the floor, you're going. Um, then when I mentioned I went through, 2019, that big transition period in my life is when I really dove into having like a super robust morning routine where I'd wake up, I'd go for a walk, I'd read, I'd journal. It was like a whole ordeal. Um, and then I kept that for a really long time. Actually, I kept the journaling practice and the reading in for a really long time. And then there was a period of my life where I was really pushing the business. So my morning routine was my feet would hit the floor, I'd make a coffee, and I would just sit at my desk. I've come to a point now in my life where I know what I need in order to feel at my best. Yes, I was very productive when I just woke up and got to work right away. But I found like, even though the rest of my day is very routine, it just started my day with chaos. It started my day with like pure adrenaline, like sympathetic drive.
Mm.
And for someone like myself who is naturally more anxious, naturally more high strung, starting my day nice and slow really makes a big difference. And it's to the point where I actually wake up earlier than I need to just so I can get that stillness into the day. So my routine currently, which is what I've been sticking to, even though it's a very busy season of business, I've just adapted my wake up time to accommodate it. So I wake up at 4:10. That's when my alarm is set. And first thing, no snooze. I don't even have I wish I could turn the option on my phone off, but my watch goes off before my phone just in case. So my watch goes off before I even press to turn the alarm off because it's a vibrating alarm. It's a vibrator. Um, I my feet have to hit the floor before I can turn it off. And for me, waking up at 4 a.m. has a few utilities. Number one, I start my day with something hard because nobody really wants to wake up at 4 a.m. And number two, I know that most people aren't willing to do that. So it kind of gives me this like feeling, makes me feel like a better person than everybody else. Um, from there, brush my teeth, use my minoxidil finasteride spray, uh, put my clothes on, and I walk downstairs. I make my coffee while I take my morning supplements. And I have the same morning drink every morning. It's just water, an element or some salt, and a little bit of aminos. I drink that. It's about a liter of water. Then I sit down on the couch with my coffee and I set a timer for 30 minutes. And other than turning my alarm off and setting the timer, I don't touch my phone.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no inputs. It's just sit on the couch for 30 minutes. I set a timer and I read. That 30 minutes and that reading alternates between like something for personal development and something for pleasure. So I'll read a book for pleasure and then a book for personal development. I've been working my way through the Dune series, just finished the 5th book. Amazing series. But then I just finished that 5th one. So I'll start a personal development book that I haven't really decided on yet. And I've got a bunch behind me. And so that's about 4:30 to 5 o'clock. At 5 o'clock, I make another coffee and I get to my desk. And from 5 to 6:30 in the morning is work. So whether it's responding to client messages, clearing my inbox, anything I missed over the course of the evening, because I go to bed relatively early. That's what I clear up at that time. At 6:30, I am on the treadmill or I'm on the elliptical or I'm on whatever cardio programming that I have for that day starts at 6:30. 6:30 to 7:30 is cardio. I have breakfast at 7 from 7:30 to 8. At 8 o'clock, I come back to my desk. I usually have a few minutes to tidy up some stuff. 8:30, I'm out the door. I go to the gym. I'm home by 11, and then I start my meetings at 11:30. So like that's every morning I get in my reading. I clear my inbox so that when I get in at 11, it's only new messages, not anything left over. And I can start my day of meetings with kind of like a fresh slate. So that's what it is now. And that's actually been really well maintained for probably the last year. I even did it during my bodybuilding prep. It just helped kind of, especially during prep when your stress is so high, just kept me level. And then starting that day with stillness and just like not having any inputs until, I'll be fair, I watch YouTube while I eat breakfast. So until about 7:30ish, I don't really touch my phone much.
Yeah, I think that's very important. Is if you can get into the routine or the habit of not getting right on your phone right away and having those inputs, because once again, even if you wake up and say you're not really officially starting your workday for a
Mhm.
few hours, like those inputs are already winding you up and getting you going. So sometimes people may think, oh, well, yeah, I have an hour before work and it's my downtime. I'm like, but I don't think you realize that your downtime by consuming any information is somehow going to affect the nervous system to some
Oh
degree.
yeah. Yeah.
But
It's subtle, but I mean, it makes a difference.
so you were saying, so that's been the last year. And then
Yeah.
before that, that's when it was like shotgun blast, get up,
Oh
go
yeah.
right out the door. And
Yeah.
how did you feel when you, like, did you notice it? Were you aware of it? Or did it kind of get to a point where you either, it was slowly creeping up when you're like, something doesn't feel right or I need to change something? Or did you have like just some big realization at some point and then that's when you made that shift?
It kind of creeps up on you because One of the things that I'm really conscious of lately is the way I'm showing up, like mentally, emotionally. Um, and I just felt like I was just getting more and more high strung. I felt like I wasn't showing up with empathy. I was more reactive. Um, and yeah, it was great because, like I said, I got so much work done because you're talking about like 2 hours of work before anyone's awake.
Mhm.
And I don't know if people are aware of this, but the first few hours of your day is when you're most cognitively like on. So I was crushing. And it actually took a lot for me to say, hey, listen, you need to start slower. And it was with a call with my therapist. She's like, you need something in your day that's just yours. And I realized how important that is that like if I start my day shotgun blast right, go, 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 I'm not going to get any time to myself until like 9 o'clock at night when I'm trying to go to bed. And that's not cool with me.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so that's my question, and that's actually something that I'm trying to figure out now, which the one thing that's different, I would say, for me is my schedule does change a little bit day to day. So if you follow me on Instagram, you see some days I'm in the gym super early, and
Hmm.
then that kind of leads into work, and I fill in the gaps with typical morning routine stuff. But what I was going to ask you, and you kind of answered the question, was when do you have that you time? And it seems like the morning for
First thing in the
you
morning.
is the you time. Where I'm at right now in my life, the me time is like the 9 p.m., right? But
Mhm.
then it's tough because, you have 9 p.m. to say 10:30, then it's lights out. I'm good with that, but I have that struggle of I either don't have that downtime and then I'm gonna wake up super early, so I feel like I miss out on that,
Mhm.
or I can, sleep in a little bit more, but then it turns into almost like the shotgun blast. So
Yep.
it's like an interesting thing that we talk about it because I'm by no means perfect. I have seasons like you said, but right now this season it's a bit like day to day changing, and that's where I'm trying to figure out. Okay, where can I fit in that me time so I feel good with everything else.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head last call that we did where you were talking about like periodizing.
Right.
One of the things that I think is really important is like I can grind. Like I know how to grind and you know how to grind. You can work. But where I struggle and where I see most other people struggle is when that grind doesn't have like a light at the end of the tunnel. Like when it's just like
Right.
a never-ending grind. So, I mean, you and I have talked about your business and the fact that, like, yeah, this might be a season of push where it has to be a shotgun,
For
but
sure.
you know that come like March, April, May, you're going to have a few things off of your plate.
Yeah.
So if you accept and just say, hey, yeah, for the next little bit, I don't have a morning routine, I have a work. Cool. That's going to be the case. But as soon as I'm able to cultivate that time, I have to do it.
Right. And that's where I think it's important for people listening, just because I think it's cool between us. We have a lot of similarities and differences and also different seasons. Right.
Hmm.
So, like, I always get super pumped because Paul wants to be a father. So I'm excited when that happens, where, I can kind of step in a little bit and be like, okay, now we can really, like, really get closer
Yeah.
with, just these different seasons. So, one of the things that I think will kind of segue us to some of the other things that we wanted to talk about, which I think is cool, is how important those stillness is.
Mhm.
And for me personally, so I don't really go over my morning routine. It's nothing that's anything crazy, but what I will say is important to me is some sort of stillness.
Okay.
So whether that's in the morning or at some point during my day, that's something I always schedule or structure in there because
Okay.
there are points in my day where I can fit that in. And I think for anybody listening to this, or Sue's probably the only person that's listening to this right now. Um, if you didn't know, that's Paul's mom. But it's that the stillness is pivotal to provide openings for self-awareness. And
Mhm.
that's going to be no distractions, finding your place. For me, one of my favorite things for stillness, and I'm sure a lot of people can resonate with this, was my morning coffee. So it's like
Okay.
that time with my morning coffee, like my phone's not near me, right? I don't have any other external stimulus. Maybe it's just nature, or if it's a nice day, I sit on the porch and I'm just sipping my coffee. And that to me is kind of like that 30 minutes for
Hmm.
you, where
Yeah.
I'm kind of just reflecting on either things that need to get done today or the feelings that I have about the things that need to get done today. Or maybe it was something from yesterday, but that's my time to just kind of breathe, which is great because I've also been noticing my HRV has been better the more that I've been really, scheduling this and working on just that, what's it called? The physiological sigh breathing. So I do
Hmm.
that a lot. And it's just kind of like, okay, what's popping in my head? What are those feelings, thoughts, emotions? And let me dive a little bit deeper into that. And it's like, if I can kind of have that little session to myself, I start to feel that the day is definitely a little bit smoother, or I'm a little
Oh
bit
yeah.
more like relaxed and almost not so much, maybe a little bit passive, but instead of being so reactive, I'm able to kind of like just take it in, and maybe that changes the course of the day a little bit. Or what it does is it puts something on the calendar that I know that I need to address with myself.
Hmm.
Because if I can't, that's going to keep snowballing. And I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of people are constantly more in reaction mode, and not so much being able to process things. Do you feel that same way?
I do. You mentioned something really interesting about like the word reaction to me is really telling because if someone is reactive, there's a difference between being reactive and being responsive. Okay.
Yes.
And this is where I was going to ask you, did you ever meditate?
Yeah. So I don't know how many people know this, but before I had the career that I have now, I was going to school for criminal psychology.
Okay.
So I wanted a job with Homeland Security. That was like my big dream gig. But when I was taking the psychology courses, we had to do a whole thing on meditation. So prior to that, I was always kind of a little bit more open minded. I was trying to figure myself out, especially in high school. So I stumbled upon a lot of Alan Watts's stuff, and I really resonated with a lot of the things that he was saying. And I read some of his books. But in this psychology class, I remember the professor had like forced us to meditate, and it was funny because at first it was within the class, and I remember like that made me uncomfortable right away
Yeah. Yeah.
because like I thought meditation needed to be like by myself in my dorm. But the more that she had us do this, the more I could get into a meditative state, not only in the class, but then I kept doing it outside. And it started off very simply. I'll never forget it. It was literally on the inhale, say the word Sue in your head. And then when you exhale, it's hum. And you can actually do the hum like when you exhale. And all that
Mhm.
was for started with like 5 minutes. We just do it for 5 minutes, and that was like the first thing. And I remember I loved the way I felt so much after those 5 minutes that I would do it every day. And then I would start to increase the duration.
Okay.
But yeah, I've gone through a lot of seasons of meditation, different types of meditation. It's something that I'm trying to incorporate more now in a very simple form,
Mhm.
because if I try to make it too complex or where I once was, it's just not the season for that. But that was my long answer to your short question.
Well, the reason I ask is because I actually took a meditation course back in 2019 when I was really struggling because just being present was really challenging for me. And similar to your Su Hum like mantra, the course that I did was on, oh my goodness, it's going to slip my mind, Yoga Nidra, which is
Yeah, yoga nidra
essentially,
is awesome.
yeah. So it was a Yoga Nidra course. And so the breathing cadence was like, the first inhale was like, I am here now in this. And each one of those was a breath. And you just kind of repeat that mantra. And it's funny that you mentioned that, you did it and then you tried to do it out. You started doing it outside of the meditation practice. That's one thing that I have found so profoundly impactful on my ability to function day to day and show up in the way that I can for other people is that at any point I can kind of lock into this presence and this responsive state where I can take in information, process it, and respond rather than trying to get to a solution right away.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you're in a stressed state, you're trying to survive, right? So the quick response is what you need, or the quick reaction, sorry, is what you need. But ultimately, the way that you're going to move forward is through a response. Um, have you read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning?
I have not, but I do believe it is in my book chest upstairs.
It's a short read, but one of the passages from that, he explains that the only thing in life that you own is the space between stimulus and response.
Mm-hmm.
And that always resonated with me because the yoga nidra practice allowed me to own that space. And my 30 minutes in the morning of stillness and reading and just reflection. And I've actually been sharing some of my reflections on social media, just like typing them out. It's very helpful to just put yourself in a state of awareness where you know what's going on and you can respond to the day. So while I don't formally meditate anymore, I would say that I'm meditating almost all the time now.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. I know for me, um, like one thing that I have the habit of doing now is whenever I pull up to the house and I'm like in my truck or I'm whether it's either in the truck or it's before I open the I guess it's always before I open the door to the house.
Okay.
It's always like a huge deep breath and
Mhm.
just like reminding myself like you are home, like this is your family, you know, you need to be a husband, you need to be a father. And it's
Mhm.
like just something I always do. And it's just like my way of like this has happened either outside or before this and stays there essentially. And then as I walk in the door, it's like, okay, here I am. This is the version of me that I'm going to present to them.
Mhm.
And I think we talked about it before, but it's like, yeah, I don't know if it was on the podcast or off the podcast, but I talked about how like I know you as Paul, you know, like
Yes.
we have a friendship. To the professional world, they see us how they see us, which is probably different than my
Mhm.
relationship with you,
Yep.
you know? So I find it fascinating, like the different characters that we do play in our own lives and to other people's lives. So for me, it's just like I need to do that because how many times have you seen or listen? I'm not perfect. I've been that guy where I've come in the house and it's like either somebody's excited to see you or maybe the opposite. The house is chaotic, and it's like you have to quickly get into that different role,
Mhm.
but also be aware of like where are you living in the reactive or the responsive?
Mhm.
So it's like how can you become the best version of yourself for the environment that you're in? So for me, that's like my way to just give myself a reset and hopefully walk in that door and it works. But I will say more often than not, like 98% of the time, that will change because it gives me that awareness. Like right
Yep.
away, I'm like, dude, you just did that.
Yep.
So it's like, okay, when I go in, I can now think like, or just pause, take it all in, you know. And sometimes I'm sure you've done it with your wife, like you, you know, the response she thinks you're going to give, and then you do the opposite,
Oh
and it
yeah.
kind of like throws people off.
Yeah. She used to get mad at me. Like I remember one of our first arguments when we first started dating. Um, and I'm totally fine to share. I've shared this publicly before. So I have been divorced before, and my ex and I were on good terms. Like I wished her well. I have no feelings towards her whatsoever, except that I hope she lives a great life. And so I was still following her on Instagram and I was still friends with her on Facebook. And Olivia didn't like that. She felt it was disrespectful. And she approached that with me. And I thought about it. I was like, you're right. If you feel that that's disrespectful, I will unfriend her right now. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. And she got so mad because I wouldn't fight with her. And I was like, she's huffed, puffed, and left the room. And I was like, babe, like, I'm agreeing with you. She's like, why won't you fight with me? I'm like, because you're right. And if you want a relationship where you're fighting with your partner, it's not going to be me.
Yeah.
And like to this day, we don't fight. We have hard conversations, but we don't fight. What I was going to ask you about, your practice before you walk into your home, I would venture a guess that one of the reasons why that works so well for you is because you know that whatever you're leaving behind, you'll have time cultivated in your day to revisit at a later date.
Yeah, and I think it's like the cliche phrase, but it's like family is everything to me. So it's
Mhm.
like if I have like the true people in my life that I choose to surround myself with, if anything comes up where I'm like, hey, I'm not going to be able to make it, or hey, I know we had this plan, but something with my family came up. If they ever give me crap for that,
Oh,
like that, first off, it doesn't happen. But in the
yeah.
past, like, as you're kind of figuring out who your friends are, they don't have the same priorities or they can't understand. That does happen. So for me, that was really important. Like, I value that as number one.
Mhm.
And like you said, I know that I will be able to address or get that figured out. And on top of that, even the clients I have, like if there's some hang up or whatever, even like with a snowstorm, it's like, dude, I got to leave my trip early and I'm flying home. It's like if your check-in's a day late, like they're like, bro, like no, no worries, no problem. Like to me,
Yeah.
maybe I think it's like the end of the world, but you start to attract those types of people, and those are the people that you really want to work with, and it goes vice versa. Like if you said to me, like, "Hey, dude, I know I'm supposed to come hang out at your crib for a couple days, but something happened with Liv," and it's just like, dude, bro, like I
Yeah.
I want you need to go take care of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'll dive one step deeper, and then we can keep going on. Is I also grew up in a very chaotic household, so for me, like all we did was be in fight or flight mode all the time. 90% of
Mhm.
it was fight mode. So, kind of piggybacking off of your funny story with Liv, when Jordan and I were still figuring out our relationship, we went through phases where we would fight like a lot
Mhm.
because we were both very similar in that way. But then it got to a point where I kind of did what you were doing. And I would say, hey, I know where this is going. I need to go outside for a walk. And I remember like at first she like couldn't like handle that. And I was
Mhm.
like, but babe, like I'm telling you, I know you maybe don't see it right now, but I'm gonna go for a walk. You need your time. Then we'll come back. And then that's where, we really have our growth. And we can kind of get into the gap
Mhm.
conversation. But now that's how it is. You know what I mean? Like we bicker in a funny way. Like
Yeah.
I think true bickering in like the way it's supposed to be is really play and love. You know what I mean? Like there's definitely you can tell when a chord is struck, and hopefully with your partner, the chord's not to strike. And if you do,
Oh, yeah.
you're aware of what's going to happen. But we're always ragging on each other, just like you would do with the boys on a team or something like that. But those are truly like where your best relationships and friendships are. So now we're at the point where if it's something serious, she knows I need my time, she needs her time, and then we come together and we have our resolution, and it's been that way ever since. So
Yeah.
for me, there's definitely been uh ups and downs and figuring that out. But if you really want to have the best relationships possible in your life, like those are the little self-awarenesses and practices that require effort, but the reward it's like 10 times. It's
Yeah.
everything.
It is. It is. And when you have a partner who's willing to go down that journey of awareness and self-reflection with you, like that's really special.
Oh yeah.
Um, I couldn't imagine living a life where I just fight with my partner all the time. But like these hard conversations that we have with our partners or with clients or with, business associates, um, I mean, this is getting into the theory that I've been thinking on. Um, so I had a meeting with my psychologist this past week, centered around like how much pressure I've been putting on myself. And there's a common thread in my personal mental health journey where I try to hold myself to these, what most would call like impossible standards. But to me, they're my standards. And the reason I hold myself to those standards is because I'm looking for some sort of internal validation that I can only get by like self-flagellation. It's like I just make myself feel so shitty for not doing the thing until I do the thing so that I feel like I am valued or I feel like I'm enough. And this was kind of starting to happen within my current journey of preparing us for a family because I really want to get the business to a certain place. I really want to be able to make sure that our finances are taken care of. So when Liv gets pregnant and has our child, that she can step away and be a parent, and then I'm also able to step away a little bit and spend more time. But my therapist was like, basically asked me the question of, are you doing it because you think your child needs that? Or are you doing it because if you don't, you're a piece of shit? And another analogy, very similar, is like, did you buy your wife flowers because you knew it would make her happy, or did you buy her flowers because it made you happy? And in this instance, with preparing for this next chapter of our lives, it really came down to I was doing it to make me feel like I was validated.
Mm.
And the point that she brought up in counter to mine was, if you try to be everything for this child, you eliminate the gaps. And what you highlighted in your conversation with Jordan and how you said, hey, I need to go for a walk. I need to step away. What you did is you created a gap. That gap is where we emotionally regulate. That gap is where we grow. And then when we come back together from the gap, that's where security develops in a relationship. So if we're talking about, a coach to client relationship, you're in a situation where the client wants to do something or you've provided them autonomy to make a decision on their own. What you're doing now is creating a gap. When they make that decision, good or bad outcome, it gives you an opportunity to come back together.
Mm.
And when you come back together and analyze it, you're creating security in the relationship. And she's like, do you really want to eliminate your child's ability to regulate themselves? I was like, well, no. Like, one of my favorite things about my father, like, my father's an amazing man, and there's a lot of things about the way that he parented me that I would change. But one of the things that he did really well is that he let me make my own mistakes, and he knew, and I knew for a fact he would always have my back.
Mm-hmm.
There was actually a time where I was driving home from the bar because I was working as a bouncer at the time, and it was 3 a.m. and I got T-boned in an intersection. And I called him, and he picked up on the first ring, and I was like, "Were you awake?" He's like, "Yeah. When you go to work, I don't sleep."
Damn.
And I was like, "Okay." And that was like a pivotal moment for me.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole growth happens in the gaps. I know it was really long-winded, but we need to find ways in our lives to create more gaps. I was telling you before the podcast started, like, one of the best gaps that we both had in our lives and we both created is in training, right?
Right.
That the gap between where you are now and the next PR, dude, that's an exciting place to be.
Yeah.
What if you got excited about all the gaps that you could create in your life right now?
Yeah, I think that's super interesting to like look at it from that perspective. You know, I guess it's definitely a skill over time, but it's like I've definitely faced a lot of adversity, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm at the point now where I've had a couple people play devil's advocate, and they're like, well, at one point, are you like inviting this into your life? And I sat there and I thought, I was like, yeah, well, maybe I am. Like, maybe it doesn't need to be this hard. But then at the same time, I was like, yeah, but if it's not this hard, it wouldn't have forced, or these gaps wouldn't have forced the growth. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? So it's like you can look at it from whatever perspective you want. But I think at the end of the day, if you were like gun to your head, do you side with gaps or no gaps? It's like gaps, you know,
100%.
because anytime, like for example, this is so stupid, but it makes so much sense, and especially you with your background, with just your knowledge. And I went through a phase of like I really love neuroscience and how we learn and neuroplasticity.
Mm-hmm.
And my growing up, my dad is very mechanical. Like when it comes to fixing cars or electronics, he's your typical blue collar. His hands are probably stronger and more gritty than 90% of men out there. Like, and I give him a lot of credit and pride for that. My weakness, or I would say trait, I didn't really, take on was I wasn't really into that kind of stuff. So I'd force myself to, because I look at that as a bonding opportunity with my dad to like go wrench on the car or do stuff around the house. But he always taught me the basics. Like I know how to change tires and, fix things in my vehicle. And I can think of actually a couple examples of this, but there were times when he wasn't around. And I remember the one is like I want to go snowboarding, and my brakes weren't finished, and my rotors were all screwed up. But it was like a challenge for me, and I
Mhm.
remember I did it, and it was like that pressure. It was the adrenaline rush of like, oh crap, if I can't go snowboarding because I'm on my vehicle, I need to figure this out. So I'm like reflecting on all the stuff my dad had taught me, right? And I ended up doing it. And I remember like I gave him a quick call just to make sure like the wheels didn't fall off on my voyage to the mountains. But he was like, no, yeah, like you crushed it. That was good. I remember this was a point too where like you could take like a really shitty video. So I was like videoing and it was like so pixelated probably, but it was enough for him to be like, no, that looks right. It should be right here. Boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom. But it's like that experience for the rest of my life. Like I know how to do my brakes and rotors, and then it happened again where I got a really bad flat tire in a snowstorm, but it was probably like 10 degrees outside. I was actually dating my wife now at the time. And, I had the new truck. So I'm like figuring out, how to change the tire on the new truck. Cause of course the tire's underneath the freaking bed of the truck. So I'm like sitting
Yeah.
there and I'm like, okay, I got to get this crow wrench thing and stick it
Mhm.
through the butthole of my truck to wheel it down. But it was like, that's really what it felt like.
Yeah,
Uh,
for sure.
but but it's like I'll never forget those skills in that gap of me throwing myself into the fire and figuring it out. You know what I mean? So there's so many
Absolutely.
examples we can go down with this rabbit hole, but I feel like it's easy to want to right away pick up the phone or call somebody to fix the problem, and yes, I understand sometimes trying to fix the problem can make it worse, but on the flip side, you also learned what not to do. So it's like,
Mhm.
okay, if I can eliminate what not to do, I can focus on what can I do. So I mean, I love it. And even with my son now, I take what I liked from parenting from my parents, and there's things I would change. I'm trying to change that, and I can find it easy, like especially when you have your infant and they're in the crawl phase and they get to the walk phase. Well, the walk phase is cool. What they don't tell you is that the kid's going to fall every 5 seconds. So it's like he gets up, and then it's like you're pumped, and then you see him face plant to the wall. And you're just like no, and you right away you want to like protect them from that,
Mhm.
but you have to get to this point truly if you I believe if you want the growth to like allow them to fall, allow
Yep.
them to fail. And then there's times where you can see that they're trying and trying and trying, and maybe they need a little nudge, but then they
Mhm.
figure it out, and then when they figure it out it's like you've just given them $1 million.
Yep.
So it's crazy to see like the different seasons of what it's like for you, but then being a parent, how you can do that with a child now. So and it takes, once again, you have to pause. Like if
Yep.
there's no pause, there's the reaction instead of the response. You may not think of it, but that's where when I talk to parents or I even reflect on, and I'm sure you do the same thing with your childhood, you're sitting there like reverse engineering it. Like, man, if I wasn't, micromanaged, or man, if I just allowed the space, like what would be the difference in the outcome, right?
Mhm. Yeah, like in the situation with your sons, like you manufactured that gap for him. But there comes a time when, and this is the next element of gaps, they're really uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
They're really, really scary. And I think most people, most of the time, until they gain some confidence in their ability to get through gaps, like until they go through the hardest thing they've ever done, and then they do another hardest thing they've ever done, and then another, and then another, and then another. Until they have that confidence, they lack the key to everything, which is acceptance. Life happens at the speed of life. And I think that most people have this expectation that life is supposed to do the things that they want it to do, and it doesn't. When that happens, there's anger, there's anxiety, there's fear. But what that actually is a gap presenting itself. And so the longer you spend fighting against acceptance, the longer it's going to take to get through that gap. And I'm not saying, and we touched on this last week. It's like there has to be a point in which you sit in the shit,
Mhm.
but take that first step, right? Get started moving through that gap. And that first step happens after you accept that you're in one.
Right.
Um, when I talk about acceptance and expectations, as somebody who gets shit done, working with coaches and business owners who are very early on in their journeys, it became very apparent to me that that's a skill, it's learned. Because the things that they would get stressed about, I just accept and I move on. But I
Mhm.
have the skill of doing that. So when I'm thinking like, okay, how can I bring people into this awareness that life happens at the speed of life and you can't control it? It became very apparent to me that trying to get them to remove expectations was the best way to do that. To the point where, like, in my marriage vows, I talked about expectations and the fact that, like, I go so far in my own personal life philosophy that I don't even expect to wake up tomorrow morning and have Liv love me. I know that sounds ridiculous. She's my wife. She loves me. But I don't expect her to. The only way in which I believe she will continue to love me is if I continue to show up as a man worthy of her love.
Mm.
So I'm going to continue to act in alignment with the man that I want to be, which is someone who is worthy of her love. And yeah, that could spiral into some of the ego seeking behaviors that I talked about earlier. But I'm at a point in my life where I really don't have expectations of anyone. Number one, because I've been disappointed a lot trying to expect myself in others, but also because if I have no expectations, I'm always pleasantly surprised.
Right.
And if I have no expectations, then I just accept everything. And I can immediately switch into, okay, if I have to accept this, what are the elements I can control? What's that first step I can take? Now I can move through the gap. Does that make sense? I know that was really long winded.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. I guess my question for you is like how arriving there, like that's a big thing for somebody, right? Like
Mm.
if you were telling me and I'm not where I'm at in my life right now, I'd be like, yeah, that sounds great and I would love to do that. But it's like, so how do you go about building that?
Start small.
Okay.
Start small. So if you
Like
start
with
with,
your coaches, like what would you say to the coaches that you work with, like that you're mentoring? Like how do you
yeah.
get them to start small?
So the first thing is like, okay, let's be aware of when we're feeling these feelings. So when you feel that stress, like to me, any sort of emotion is an alarm, right? Whether it's stress or anger or fear, it's an alarm to say that, hey, something's wrong. So if you're aware that that alarm is going off, that's a huge first step. Because again, if you haven't cultivated that level of awareness and you're just reacting to everything, you don't get that space.
Mhm.
So what you're doing with the awareness is you're creating the space. And then the next question is to ask yourself why. Like, why do I feel this way? And so when I think about starting small, it comes down to writing down all the points in your day where you feel stressed or you feel overwhelmed. Overwhelm is a big one for business owners because there's so many things to keep track of. And once you make note of those things, then just kind of move on. Do what you're going to do, but just make note of it. Then from there, I start to get them to make note of how that level of awareness changed their action.
Mhm.
And for most of them, most of the time, they actually are more action oriented because they recognize what they're feeling and they've taken that space. Then it's okay. Now to answer the question why, it could be a number of reasons. It could be, oh, there's just so much on my plate. Cool. If there's so much on your plate, let's look at your plate. Let's look at your schedule. And then we kind of boil down to systematizing the way that they handle their stress versus reacting to that emotion. And they realize very quickly that there is a lot within their control, even when they're feeling out of control.
Mm.
So it's a very slow progression. And for many coaches, it's not something that can be fixed in a week or a month. It takes years. But you can get to a place where you're not as stressed very quickly just by creating that awareness. And then you look at the systems that you use in your business. I keep glancing to my left because that's my schedule. I'm like, my schedule is the best stress reliever ever.
Right.
Um, but that's the starting point for me.
Now, I'm trying to think because I know you're not in this situation right now, but what happens when there's a curveball thrown in there, right? Like you have your schedule, it looks picture perfect, right?
Mhm.
Boom, you get impaled, you get T-boned. Like, how do you process? Is that just going back to acceptance first? Like
Yeah.
okay. So it's just like, what are they, like a flow chart essentially,
Mhm.
right? So it's like you create this flow chart, which honestly, maybe just cool to create. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
just have it somewhere. It's like if A happens, okay, proceed here. If it does not happen, I go to here, right? And it's funny because I use that for. I mean, at this point, I know when I'm, overreaching for training, but when I was younger, I'd be like, well, am I systemically fatigued or am I just being a bitch? But then I was like, okay, right. But it's like, it's true though, because you sit there and you're like, well, my body's telling me all these things. Like, I must need a deload. And it's like, motherfucker, you're 2 weeks in, brother. But it's like,
Yeah.
now when you look at it, it's like, okay, cool. Logically, I break it down, it takes away the emotion. And I'm just like looking at it for what it is
Mhm.
versus letting my emotions create something that it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. The flow chart works phenomenally because at the end of the day, priorities rule all. So like if that curveball comes in, let's use two like polar opposite examples. Okay. So you've got your day all laid out, your son gets sick.
Not good.
That's a really easy decision to make. You call everyone who needs to be called and you delay everything that needs to be delayed and you take care of your son.
Mhm.
Very easy decision. Curve Flip that situation. You have a day planned with your son, but someone approaches you with a business opportunity. In my eyes, for you, that's a really easy decision to make. Hey, man, sorry, I can't do that. I've got a day planned with my son. Maybe there's another opportunity for us to do that down the road.
Right.
So to me, that's where the priorities come in. It's like, yeah, I have this beautiful schedule all laid out, but at the end of the day, I know where my priorities lie.
Mhm.
And that makes my decision making very, very easy.
Right.
So I know that this idea has not been pressure tested in real life with me and a child. And I'm very much aware that there's going to be a learning curve to this. But at the end of the day, I accept that gap. And it's one that I am so excited to jump into.
Yeah, no, I love it. But I think I guess I guess it's tough for us because we think about this stuff all day long, hence why we're doing
Yeah.
a podcast on it. But I would say that there are a lot of people that don't think about this kind of stuff. And I would
Mhm.
hope that this podcast, is just two friends who are just talking about it, but it gives you some sort of insight. And I truly feel like if you're listening to this and you're kind of either like seeing yourself in what we're talking about, just by simply listening to this, and it's not going to be perfect, it's not going to happen overnight, but if you can already
Mhm.
get these ideas in your brain, that is prepping you 100% and building those skills. Because as I always say, you're going to be failing forward.
Mhm.
It's not going to be perfect, but just to have, once again, the awareness and to be able to process things in this way is going to set you up for so much more success down the road and give you a base to build on than throwing yourself into the fire, which, yes, can be good, but I'd rather be thrown into the fire knowing that I got a backpack with some goodies in it that I can use when I need them. You know what I'm saying?
100%, man. 100%. There's no worse feeling than, you know, being in the grind and not seeing a way out. Like I've been there too. Like you're pushing towards a goal and you're like, I need to reach this goal. And then all of a sudden you're like, why? Why? How do I? And then you're sunk, $100,000 into a project and you're like, oh my God, I have to make this back. Maybe it's time that you give up. It's time that you give up and that you pivot. I actually heard someone speak about this, that, some of the most successful people are successful because they know when to pivot, not because they see things through all the time. And that got me thinking, and maybe that's a subject for another podcast, of like all the things that we've done and had to pivot around and how that made us feel. Because like, dude, that failure, the perception of failure is one that will poke a lot of holes in all of your life philosophies.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, we could definitely dive into it in another podcast, but I'm sure you've heard of like sunk cost fallacy.
Oh yeah.
So like I had that moment with the stage I was at, uh, owning the Lions Den, the big one that I had for 8 years, and that had to do with the Lions Den, but it had to do with toxic relationships I was involved with, and it really hit me because my pride, right? Like my pride was, oh,
Mhm.
I invested so much time, energy, money into the business or these relationships, and my belief in them was far greater than the reality of the situation, right? So it was like having to come to terms with that is really tough. But on the flip side, closing the gym down, getting out of these toxic relationships, if you're looking at your timeline, it was probably like a year to a year and a half where everything in my life changed. And it's like, okay,
Mhm.
if say I put, hey, you can make $2 million, it's on the table. Like, do you want $2 million? Somebody's like, yeah, absolutely, I want $2 million. Like, well, the catch is it's going to take 5 years, right? Like some people, maybe I should say 10 years, but some people in 5 years would like already be like, ooh, like 5 years, But it's
Yeah.
like in the grand scheme of it, 5 years is a blink of an eye. So it's like just having that perspective that when you're in these situations and you think, it's going to be a long time period or it's going to suck, which it can in the moment for sure, whether that's with an injury, relationship, business, etc. In reality, it's nothing. Kind of just like
Drop in the
you were hitting
bucket.
on, like it is nothing. It's like, yeah, $100,000 seems like a lot, and it is a lot in that moment.
Mhm.
But it's like where you're at now. That $100,000 to you is probably more of, I want to say like a pot, but it's just like it's like, like you almost feel better about it because of where you're at right now. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It makes it seem like not so much of a hit. So I totally,
Well,
totally resonate with that.
dude, if I didn't take that hit when I took that hit, I wouldn't be where I am now.
Right. That's it, dude. Like that's
Yeah.
the money right there.
Yeah. Um, Anything else you want to chat about?
No, I mean, I made an analogy about changing my tire by sticking a rod up its butt. So I think that was a good one. Other than that, I think this was a great podcast
I think it
actually.
was. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I mean, you're really getting the raw and real two dudes on a Tuesday night just shooting the shit. I love
Well,
it now. Yeah.
thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you later.
Yeah, we'll come up with some more stuff to talk about without a name of the podcast yet. But we
No, I
got
think
you.
we'll
We
get
got
a
you.
name.
We'll
We
get it.
got you. Bye.
Peace.